There we go.
Here we go.
Right. I think we're live. It flipped you around both times, Kim. All right. So hi everybody. We're live on the Eventide Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I'd like to thank these guys for showing up and being willing to hang out for an hour and kind of talk about what we do and how we do it and how things have changed with the pandemic. So maybe we can go around and introduce ourselves to the internet. I'm just gonna go around my squares. Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris Allen. I'm the chief engineer at Sear Sound and freelance engineer and mixer.
Right on. Ted.
Hi, I'm Ted Young, a freelance engineer. I used to be on staff at Water Music, which is where I met James. And also I used to be on staff at the Magic Shop. And now here I am working out of my home studio.
Right on. Erin.
Hi, I'm Erin Tonkon. I'm a freelance producer, engineer, and mixer. For this, I was the engineer for Tony Visconti for many years, and now I float around.
Right on. Jeff.
Hello, I'm Jeff Berner, producer, engineer, mixer, player of guitar parts that aren't that challenging. I work freelance, but I work mostly out of Studio G, but I'm in my house right now.
And Kim.
Hello, I am Kim Rosen. I have my own mastering studio called Knack Mastering in New Jersey. That's been running for about 11 years now.
Awesome. And I'm James Frazee. I am a producer, mixer, engineer kind of guy, and I'm sitting in my studio, Hobo Sound in Weehawken, New Jersey. And it's awesome to have y'all here. And maybe a good place to pick up is right what we were talking about before we actually went live, which is, so Kim, you built your studio in your house, but before that you were talking about working out of kind of your living room.
Yeah, position that I had before started my own studio. I was let go unexpected, and I didn't really have a plan in place to master on my own. So I kind of went at it and configured my living room in my house for mastering. You know, moved the couches, set up a desk, and so I essentially lived in a mastering room for 2 years before we put on the addition and built a dedicated mastering room, which is way nicer and a very nice place to hang out when I'm not working. I have friends. It's pretty cool.
Right on. And I've never been in your room, but you've mastered a few things for me that I mixed recently that are like out of sight good. So hats off to you. Really.
Well,
really
thanks, man.
stuff. Yeah.
They came, so.
Say that again.
I said they came to me in good shape, so.
Right on. I do. I try. So everybody, I mean, Ted, you're working out of your house. We're all kind of working out of our houses. So how has that changed things as far as, I mean, Jeff, Chris, you guys are mixing on large frame consoles most of the time. Ted, you've got your own place and kind of like a hybrid setup going on. How has this pandemic changed or not changed your workflows to everybody? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I still would be mixing on large frame, have been mixing on large frame consoles, but I mean, this is obviously just since I wasn't able to take a Neotech home with me. This has obviously pushed me towards mixing in the box and made me like really examine and sort of sit down and in a way that I maybe wasn't comfortable with before. Like, all right, what does parallel compression actually mean in the box? And like all the tricks that I was used to on the console, like kind of sit down and be like, all right, you need to figure this out now. So it's just, it's good and it's beneficial in a way that, you know, I've worked really hard at it, and I think I've gotten to a place where I feel very good about the mixes I'm doing in the box. But
yeah,
you know, without sounding like a stickler for, let's just make sure it's on a big console or it's not going to be a song. It's like, no, that's ridiculous. Like all the hardware and software sounds great nowadays. So
Yeah.
It's been kind of a revelation to really like dive into that stuff.
Yeah, I found, like, I don't know if anyone else had this same moment of like transitioning from analog consoles to working in the box, but there is like a reckoning of like, oh, I don't know, I can't do what I normally want to do. I have to figure out how to get the same result. Oh no, I don't know what I'm doing. It's like there's this whole kind of like, in fact, like Jeff, like you're saying, like I feel like the quality of the digital stuff and a lot of newer plugins and stuff is far superior than it was even like 10 years ago.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
It's like, it's pretty mind blowing, but there is like a whole thing of like like how do I make this sound good?
Right, the first step's a doozy, no doubt. I remember that. Yeah, the first mix I did in the box was like, how can I do this? I need to go get a Neve console.
Yeah,
now.
Same thing. I mean, I was like, wow. So every meter in Pro Tools is clipping, and it's been 10 minutes since I started trying mix. This is bad. But yeah, I mean that like you were saying, Ted, like I completely agree. I think all the like the recent digital, you know, the hardware and software wise, like stuff sounds really, really great and way better than, you know, 10, 15 years ago for sure. But so then it comes down to it's way less of like, oh, well, this doesn't sound as good. To me, it's more like, how do I actually take the step and try and really refine like my workflow and like do the hard work of figuring out ways to get to where you used to be. Sorry, I'm hogging the screen. Go talk.
Oh, no, just stuff.
Yeah, no, it's like, how do I use this new set of tools to achieve the same result?
Exactly.
And you know, it's not like one's better or worse or anything. It's just like, it's just different. It's just a different way to get, you know, what you want.
Yeah. I always found that I had to do less on a desk to balance things.
Yeah. And
I had to do less on a desk to make it. And I think a lot of this is not a new concept. I think I've heard a lot of people say it, but you know, on a desk, you were trying to get things to separate, and in digital, you're trying to get them to glue together.
Mm.
And I found that to be very true. I mean, mixing like a board mix on a vintage console kind of instantly sounds 80% of the way there. Like I would have to work for a couple hours to get to there in the box. And that's not necessarily bad, because when we're tracking in the box, we can, you know, basically be mixing as we go. You know, my mixes are halfway there by the time I'm done tracking.
Right.
Because I can keep everything. So you start mixing as soon as it's done. Yeah, as soon as you're recording.
Yeah, 95% of my mixing is done in the box and has been for a while now. I think I came up a little bit later than everyone else here, maybe. So I had, you know, a slight crossover, but yeah, my workflow hasn't changed drastically, other than I'm in a new environment and having to figure that stuff out. But you know, always recorded in studios. But then the nature of today's industry and the limited budgets and all of that, like I feel grateful to have come up when I did, where I was very comfortable digitally. And that's kind of, I think, the way things have to be now, because no one has, you know, the budgets to spend to have a studio to mix in, you know, unless you have your own space. So, you know, not a huge change for me, but definitely some of that, like, there's this thing on, you know, when you're analog, when you're on a console, you can throw up the faders and it's going to sound kind of good. And like the same is not really true in Pro Tools. You got to do, I think, a little bit more work and balancing.
Yeah.
The budget thing is what has me mixing from home mostly now. As soon as I noticed the budget started to fall apart, I was watching all of my regular mix clients that I would mix on the Neve at Sear, all kind of just disappeared to guys that were charging half as much, a third as much.
Right.
But Chris, you're talking about for a while, not just
yeah. I mean, probably in the last 10 years, you know, and so I as soon as I saw that writing on the wall, I just started buying and collecting so I could work from home. Started out as just a laptop with a UAD satellite and moved on to, I've got summing mixer and a rack of outboard gear and tubes everywhere and stuff, and anything I can do to kind of make a hybrid, but everything kind of stays static. So everything's instant recall, but it is getting a lot of analog color. Just anything I could do to get as close to Studio A at Sear without having to spend $1 million.
Right. Yeah, because that was like the first thing to start going were mixing sessions. Like people just stopped booking mixing sessions at big studios. It's like you're saying, it's like you see the writing on the wall, and it's like, well, if I want to be competitive, I have to kind of embrace this and figure out a way.
Yeah, I'd say a third of my income is from mixing at home, that would just not be at Sear at all at this point. It's just money that people can't afford to spend. And, for the same price as one day mixing in Studio A at Sear, I can spend 4 or 5 days on a record and get the details out of it that I want and really deliver a much better product in the end, for the same price, and it's, for me, that's been working out really well. I don't know about how well it's working out for Sear, but
Well, if it's lost business anyways, it might as well be lost to you, right?
Yeah, exactly. Trying to take those projects back, and kind of maintain clients, and it works. It took a while to build it in a way that I feel seamlessly comfortable going into work all day and then coming home and mixing and then going back, but it works.
And you feel like being able to spend, I'm in a ballpark, but you feel like being able to spend like 3 days on 3 songs versus having to mix all of them in one day, but on a sweet desk, you're getting the better deal by being able to do it at home.
Yeah, I mean, the majority of the mixing I'm doing right now is jazz. I've gotten really kind of deep in the jazz community over the last, 5-10 years. And so their budgets in particular are very low. They want to spend all the money to come to Sear for the piano, for the mic collection. So it's captured really well, and for the environment. But once that happens, mixing and mastering is $2,000, $3,000 budget.
Wow.
So, to be able to sit down and spend a couple of days on a record, and some of these records I can sit at home and mix in a day for first drafts too. But most of the time it's we can do some revisions, we can fine tune things and really deliver a more polished mix than just trying to cram it all in a 10-hour day.
Yeah, but I think, James, that notion of I think there's sort of like the mindset of the process has sort of been rewritten. It's not like people are like, hey, can we change this and this? And it used to be like, well, we have to book another day and do a recall and all this stuff. And if you try to, like, that kind of, it doesn't fly.
It's ingrained, right? Yeah, recalls are part of mixing now. It's not, we're not printing stems. We're not, nobody's booking another day at the studio. You have to revise your mixes.
Yeah, with that, like working in the box mindset and sort of incorporating the analog with the digital, like the analog, if you're trying to keep the analog process with that digital mindset of being able to continually tweak, you have to kind of figure that out.
Well, and how are you, so with your home rig, well, your studio rig, with your console, how are you integrating all of that? The recalls and the analog to the digital?
I do stems on every song.
No kidding.
Every song I do, yeah.
Wow, okay.
And it takes like that much more time, but then it's like, I have that much flexibility. And then I can, like, if I take that much extra time, it saves me that time later, and then I can stem and then I can just move on.
Right.
Like I thought I would be doing more recalls and stuff, but the stems have been working really fine. So
wow, great. So
yeah.
you're using, but I mean, you're using that console like a console. You're not utilizing it as a summing mixer and then leaving it. You're actually kind of moving and shaking.
Sometimes.
Yeah. Okay.
Sometimes. I mean, there are sometimes where it just kind of, things just sit there, but
right.
I think but I think it like you're saying, it is easier to just kind of like push things up and be like, all right, that's like 80% there, and then I can go in the box and do the extra 20% or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Right on. And Erin, how, I guess the one thing that I would notice is must have changed is that, since you're kind of out of town,
Mhm.
your listening environment is different.
Mhm.
How has that been, being away from kind of the space or spaces that you are really intimately familiar with? What's that been like?
I mean, because I've moved around so much in my career and life, and I generally try to remain flexible environment wise, like I have a pair of Audis headphones that are incredible and I trust them and I reference everything on those. And that's like my saving. That's why I'm able to be out of town and still working. I mean,
Right.
it's like knowing and, being able to know what the approximation of what I'm hearing in those headphones might be, in the analog world, because I've used them so much. So that's saving me right now. And I mean, everything's going swimmingly and it's nothing, it used to be new environment. I'd have to really adjust and take time to adjust to the new space. And it's like, I got to be quicker at this. And it's like having those references is super helpful. So it's going well. Luckily,
Awesome.
love those headphones.
Yeah, I said it before we went live, but I'll say it again now that we are live. I think this is going to change the way that we do a lot of stuff, because all of us are able to sit in our homes and do this. And some of us have already been doing that, but yeah, I wonder what it's going to be like when we pop out of this. A, with us realizing that we can do this similar with less, but B, our clients realizing that we can do similar with less, and how that's going to affect coming in and mixing in a studio.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the reasons I guess I got everybody together was the idea that most of us, all of us, are kind of intimately familiar with tape. Right? We've all run tape. We all know large frame consoles. We all know how to do this completely outside of the box, not looking at a screen at all. But are also part of the digital generation. All of us grew up with computers. We're, I don't know. I work with guys who are twice my age a lot in production, who are producing. And in a lot of times I'm their lifeline to computers. And I know, right, everybody has had this experience, but I guess my question for everybody and the conversation I want to get into is how has that affected you in digital, in that how has coming up through analog maybe made you do things differently than you watch people who haven't come up in analog do things? And how are you integrating analog into your work life, either at your client's behest, people saying, well, it's got to be on tape, or I really want that tape sound, and figuring out what they mean by that because it's kind of an effect at this point, or just because it's something that you need to make a product sound how you want it to sound?
Well, it's here we do a lot of the use one or two reels and immediately dump to Pro Tools thing. And I'd say almost anything that does actually get mixed at the studio hits half inch at the very least.
And is that because of the client, or is that because of you say, if we're here, we should go to half inch?
If I do get to mix there, I push pretty hard for the half inch. We have, you know, often it'll be just using one reel and printing directly off the repro head right into Pro Tools. Whenever I can send a mastering engineer tape, I'd rather, you know, because they can pick and choose
between analog and digital.
Electronics and between the analog and digital. But at the very least, I'll print a digital and analog version at the same time.
Sure.
So for mastering, there'll be two options. But that's about it. I mean, we haven't really been doing that many strictly analog sessions in a while.
Yeah, sure.
So tape prices, I think, is a big part of that.
It's like $300 a reel, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, it's pretty brutal.
A question for Chris and Kim. Do you, when you do the analog versus the digital master, and then Kim, I don't know how often people send you like analog versus digital things. Is it more prevalent in one versus the other, or do people choose one over the other, or is it is there sort of like a trend there that people kind of prefer one thing? Because I've found that I think people are just trained to hear the digital thing, and if they hear tape, it's like, ooh, what's that? Ooh, there's hiss. Like, ooh, what is that? Like, and I'm like, well, it's tape hiss. And then if I do incorporate analog, I have to do a lot of noise reduction to just get out tape hiss. So it's like, okay, that's, you know, I didn't know that you didn't realize that was part of it, but that's a thing. So is there, like, have either of you found that there's a trend?
When somebody's sitting with me, if somebody's sitting with me while I'm printing to tape, the novelty of printing to tape, I think overwhelms any other sense of what sounds better. You know, it almost always ends up, we almost always send the tape version to mastering. But Kim, as a mastering engineer, what do you always receive?
I've had exactly one project to send tape in 11 years.
Wow.
And the rest of the time my tape machine is sitting there, because I also, in my experience, I have had, or I do get requests to hit tape in mastering, but I find that doing it in mastering doesn't necessarily have the impact that the client is looking for. So it's more of me interpreting what they want. They want the tape sound. And I know how to get that for them. And I find that it's always better done in mixing. So if you hit tape and mixing and you send that to me, it just is better.
Yeah, I've definitely found that coming, and I've done both, but coming straight out of Pro Tools and not summing in any analog way, and then hitting a 2-inch, a half-inch tape machine does not do the same thing if you are summing in any way. And the more you can sum, the better. But, you know, a 16-channel summing mixer will start to sound like something, but straight out of 2 converters is like, you might as well not be doing anything.
Yeah.
Right. And it's really the point of my gear and my analog chain. I mean,
Yeah.
We were talking before about, you know, how quarantine has affected the tools that you're using if you're not at your analog console anymore. But when I started 11 years ago building my own room, I started in the box, and it took me all but 2 weeks of struggling with plugins. Yeah, this was 11 years ago, but I just couldn't get it to sound the way I wanted it to sound. So that's when it was very clear to me that investing in some analog gear and some converters was just really necessary for me to continue to work. You know, it's really just, there's plenty of people now with digital plugins and how great they are that work in the box, and it's pretty amazing. But yeah. I'm still kind of stuck in my signal chain that I have going on, and analog is pretty important for that.
James, you said, go ahead.
So no, go ahead there, please.
You said something about how we bring the analog world and our experience there into the digital world. And that's what I think about a lot, because there's so many limitations in the analog world that don't exist in the digital world. And I think limitations are pretty important for the artistic process. So for me, especially like working all analog, there's nothing visual, and there's so much visual in the digital world. So it becomes a lot about reminding yourself to like really use your ears, and really not look at what's going on. And then there's a million plugins out there. It's like, what plugins really sound best? What am I really comfortable working with? What can I really get what I want with? And then bringing that same sort of limitation practice to the artist, in terms of like, it's way easier to punch when you're not on tape, but it's like, there's a flow that happens when you're not punching every other word, that sounds a lot better in the final product.
Yeah.
That's a lot of what I bring into, and I've worked much more digitally than analog, just the time I came up, but learning analog and then bringing that into the digital world has been helpful for me, in that I don't see with people that are younger than I am necessarily. It's like, well, we have all the time and all the toys in the world, and it's like, that doesn't always yield the best,
That's right.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think that's essential, especially now. It's like, you can buy a iPhone that has like more computing power than like ever before. It has GarageBand. You could spend the technology is clearly there, but I think it's up to sometimes the artist, but definitely the producer, the engineer at some points to like kind of keep that in mind. Like I do try and approach working digitally like working on tape, especially when it comes to making decisions. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, of course, it's like, I don't know, like maybe we need to come back to this, or yes, you're allowed to do a second take or something like that. But being clear about being able to make decisions so that tomorrow when I open it up, it's still going to sound like a song, and I'm not going to be like, well, wait, there was this one thing I was messing around with, and there were these 3 other possibilities, and I don't know why I imported an episode of the Benny Hill Show for some reason. Now it's like a completely different thing.
Right. So, well, it's hard to build a song when you don't actually know what any of the stuff that you've recorded is going to sound like. Yes. If you don't commit to a sound, if you don't commit to a vibe, if the drums can sound any way that you want them to at any time, how are you ever going to move forward and make something really great? You're just going to kind of like flop around in mediocre.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of, sorry, Jeff. I feel like a lot of sessions that I get are they're like not done. It's like the notion of mixing is like finish, arrange, comp, and okay, like I'm happy to do all that, but it's like this doesn't feel like it's like that, like reversing like that process. Like recording used to be this notion of like get it the best you can and like have it be final when you record this thing, but then now it's like, okay, well, we're just gonna do that and then move on. It's like, it's almost just like, just putting the idea down is like important, not of like having it be final, which is like what like what you're saying about like the analog mindset of like you have to like commit something. It's like the non-committal thing, and you get these sessions and it's like, all right, this is not going to be as straightforward as I thought it's going to be.
Yeah, I've been there, man. Woof. but also, I mean, on the positive side of that, because I think like I've definitely had that same experience where it's like, this is not mixing. I've had the experience of, there's one artist in particular who I'm in the middle of mixing a record for, but he is recording all of this stuff himself at home. And it's really great that he's going for like a lo-fi thing, because that's what it's going to be. And it's cool. It's like, he gets it and that's what he wants. But I'll start mixing it and send him a mix and tell him that I think what overdubs I think it needs. So it really is this kind of weird, and it's one of the first times I've engaged in it, but I'm really enjoying it. I'm enjoying going, okay, let's take this thing that is kind of like all your ideas, let's format it, let's put it together, let's make it sound kind of how you want to hear it, and then move on from there. And like, yeah, you need a harmony and you need another like element in the chorus now that it's actually a mix. It's wild. And some of it is because he doesn't have he's engineering himself and he doesn't know how to do anything other than record a bunch of tracks, throw paint.
Right. Yeah, the throwing paint thing, yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's like everything comes down to a good arrangement, and it's a lot easier to have like a bad arrangement in the digital world. You're not afforded that luxury when you're, all analog. So yeah, that's a big thing, is like even like pre-production. I'm really big on like, let's have a solid where you like get in the studio, and like the money constraints too, like time is money. Like let's not mess around. Let's everyone be tight. And that's, it's an analog mindset.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm huge on pre-production too. I don't ever want to go into the studio with a band or an artist without rehearsing first.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nightmare. So, Kim, going back to talking about like, the impact of tape, like people have asked you to run to tape, but it doesn't really give them what they want to hear. You have a hardware company that makes a box that kind of adds harmonic content to things. Yeah.
Yeah. So, as I was building my mastering chain, when I started my own room, you fall into these habits and you pay attention to them. They start to kind of make sense and you become more aware of them. And a lot of the time, the way that I'm using my gear is I'm not really using my compressors to compress the crap out of something and mastering. I'm using the electronics in the compressor that sound really great and add a glue without actually really compressing to impart a sound. And so instead of buying, a $4,000 compressor to do that one cool thing, we thought of creating a unit that kind of did that in various ways that you can combine in all different ways. And basically what it's doing is it's a tube loading amplifier. So we're loading 6SN7 tubes, which are inherently really clean tubes, but you can load the tubes in different ways. You can add a transformer element to the sound that you're working on. You can boost high frequencies and low frequencies in a gentle way. But really it just, it became the perfect kind of tool for mix bus or for mastering to add subtle enhancements to the sound of what you're working on,
Right.
all in one box.
Without reducing gain.
Right. Well, absolutely. So what we're doing with this is that even when we're loading these tubes, we're balancing it. So you're never going to hear a jump in the volume. You're just going to hear what the tubes are doing, how they're being loaded, transformer going in, high lift. And we do have a clean solid state output gain where you can adjust there as well. But it just became this like super versatile analog box that can do a lot of those things that people really think about. That's what analog is. It's kind of making these enhancements without totally messing with and manipulating the sound in a damaging way.
Yeah, great. Yeah, no, yeah. Sorry, Jeff, go. Yeah.
No. What's the name of the company?
Yeah, I want
Whitestone Audio.
Great.
Right on, Whitestone Audio.
Well, I know someone that could get you a demo, guys. So just just reach out.
I love the concept. It's great. There's a million compressors. There's a million EQs. It's nice to see something that's really singular, and really just like harmonically enriching. I think it's super cool. Yeah,
and my husband and I, developed it, started the company. We had no experience manufacturing gear. Yeah. And we were just naive enough, not really understanding how difficult it was. It took us 6 years from the idea to, developing it, building it, testing it, sourcing parts, building it. It was quite the journey. But, came out better than we could have ever imagined, which is obviously best case.
Awesome. Yeah, I may be ringing you up after this to to check it out.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, guys.
But
No more.
another notion of I found when people ask for like analog or for the tape thing, like they want it to be an extreme effect. It's like I have this really nice Ampex half-inch machine that it used to belong to Headgear in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And it's like a lot of really cool records were on it. So it's like there's also the like nostalgia thing of like, cool, like yeah's recorded on that machine, like it's cool. And it sounds really good. So anytime I run stuff through it, people are like, it's like, it's almost like, do I need to, like, is the analog thing, like, do I need to get like a cassette machine or something? So like something that's like more extreme.
Mhm.
So it's like, because like the peak of the tape technology, it was like pretty hi-fi, like very hi-fi.
Right. Well, and that's one of my things with this is that tape, they weren't trying to make it sound crappy. The idea was that it would sound great, you know? Like I always tell people, like, those Tom Petty records are on tape. They sound squeaky clean.
Yeah.
You know, it's not grimy, and that, right. I have a lot of people coming to me like, tape means like messed up.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry, Ted.
Oh no, I just said yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ted. I had worked and still work on an MCI JH24 for years, like before I went to Studio G, and with that, the same machine as that G right now, it's in the B room. But it was really my first time working on, the first time I worked on a Studer was at G, and I was kind of like, after all these years of, you know, the MCI isn't super dirty, but it's not super clean either. I love it. You know, it's partially just because I've worked on it for so long. But the first couple of times I used the Studer, I was like, yeah, that okay, you know, which I realize is not a very popular opinion, and like its purpose was different. Again, like as you said, James, in the days where I was like, let's try and make this as hi-fi as possible. But I was I almost had to like kind of unlearn what I knew. I was like, oh, okay, if you hit the Studer really hard, or sorry, if you're not hitting it really hard at 30, it kind of sounds like Pro Tools.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, no doubt.
I mean, I'm clearly I'm exaggerating, but it's just to illustrate like the differences in what people perceive tape to be as opposed to like what it can actually be. You know.
Right. Yeah.
It seems like it'd be worth just, you know, like a 1/4 inch at 7.5, but nobody wants to hear that noise either, you know? Yeah. So it's like, you can't do cassette either because, you know, that's what they really want to hear. But again, they'll be turned off completely by the noise floor. So right. It's hard to explain to people that tape sounds usually pretty amazing, you know?
Right.
And the people who hate the noise floor are also the ones who are listening to like 70s Neil Young records, but they don't want it on their own record.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, and it's a cumulative thing, or for me anyways, it's a cumulative thing, like a bass drum on Pro Tools and a bass drum on a 24 track side by side. They kind of sound the same. You can make up the difference with EQ. It's when you have 24 tracks of something that you're trying to get to stick together, for me, that analog really, like that little bit of crosstalk and the little bit of like similar harmonic, you know, information that just the nature of tape is imbuing onto the signal somehow makes it glue in a way that Pro Tools doesn't. Yeah. I had an artist that I was talking to about making a record play me something that they had recorded, like some some songs they had recorded, and one of them they said, well, we really wanted a tape sound for this. And I said, cool. And they said, well, so we ran it through the 2-track tape machine and brought it back into digital and then sent it to mastering. Great. They played it for me. And it was, I mean, the tape machine was so broken, obviously. There was so much wow and flutter. And they didn't deny that. I kind of said, wow, that's really, you know, kind of dirty. And, you know, a little like the tape machine was obviously messed up, and they were like, yeah, it turned out really good because of that. And it's cool. Like it was an effect though, you know, it wasn't like this medium that allowed for an easier process or a different process. It was just an effect. And it was wow and flutter, you know, it was the wow and flutter knob on like Waves Kramer tape or whatever.
Yeah, I find most of the time when people, like exactly what you've all been saying, when people want tape and then I explain like, well, the tape you're thinking of is not the tape that you're used to hearing and those, you know, those records that you get nostalgia from, and they want exactly what you're talking about, like a really strong effect, which is better achieved kind of digitally, you know, and I mean, that's just where I kind of try to lead people for their own sake. And mine.
Especially if there's going to be recalls involved too, Erin, where it's like, do you really, you know, you want to spend this amount of time just reprinting tape mixes, you know, or spend this amount of money reprinting mixes to tape?
Right.
So guys, we have some questions from the internet, and they're all for you, Ted.
Oh.
I wrote in.
So, from Facebook, what do you think about console emulating plugins? The example being SoftTube Console 1.
I mean, I think the description is fairly straightforward in terms of like there are a bunch of plugins that, you know, on every channel that are supposed to emulate a console en masse.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that's the idea. Yeah, I've never been particularly impressed with any of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, even as someone that like uses or used to before all this weird stuff started happening, uses a big console. I don't know. I haven't really felt compelled to go down that avenue. I'd be curious to hear it, but I haven't been like, this is what's missing. I need SoftTube.
Yeah, I don't know. Here, I think there's just kind of like a general note on how like the landscape has really changed. I think there's this notion of recording a really clean front end and then manipulating the harmonic information later. And I think that's like part of it. It's like you can get that stuff like on the front end, but it's the, you know, like the transformerless thing, like having everything be like really clean and pristine going in and then kind of like dialing that thing in later. And it's like,
right.
I particularly don't necessarily work that way. So I don't kind of use those tools, I guess. Like,
yeah, well, it kind of leads back to the idea of like, yeah, is like when you're done tracking a record, it should kind of be done, and part of that is like compressing a vocal when you're recording it. And yeah, you should do, I mean, especially working in the box, I run as much as I can through what I think I'm going to need later so that it sounds as much like a record when the band walks into the control room as possible.
I would bet that that's probably true for most of us here, especially, you know, when it's analog, sort of like the analog digital merger. I mean, I know that I agree with what you're saying, well, what everybody's saying. It's like what you were saying, Ted, about like not really working in a way where you're looking to shape the harmonics later. Like, yeah, that does happen, but
yeah,
I like stuff to, and again, it depends on the project. You might be like recording a source and then like sampling something or doing something like way out there with plugins. But, you know, think about the most basic thing, like recording drums or recording a vocal in terms of like getting the front end to really happen.
Right.
And then I'll run it with plugins. Yeah.
gotten a couple of plugin alliance, the like Brainworks plugins, and they have this thing where if you have like a stereo EQ or like a bus compressor, there's this like you can like toggle through variable, like they kind of do like they modeled the differences in channels or the inherent differences in a piece of hardware because resistors can only be 1% tolerance, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And I always just turn it to the same thing because I don't really know what it's doing. And if I don't really know what it's doing, it seems kind of pointless. You know, it's like, why am I fooling myself that my left and right sound different? Like we tried to make them sound the same for so long, and now we're trying to make them sound different. Oh no.
Yeah.
So yeah. So but I guess nobody has any like actual experience using them as a tool, the console.
You know, with the UAD stuff, I tried throwing a 1081 on every single channel, that kind of thing, and I'm a huge fan of their stuff. I think their stuff sounds really good. It's the only reason I feel comfortable leaving a studio with such a ridiculous amount of gear. But you know, there's so much more to the console. You know, I'm fortunate enough to spend a lot of time on this like pristine, you know, 8038. But you know, there's bus amps. There's so much more involved in the chain coming out of that. You know, in the summing network and everything like that.
Yeah,
That just throwing a 1081 on every channel, it's not the same effect. You know, it's
right.
You're just adding some color, which may or may not be the right choice, but it really can't be, in my opinion, it just can't be a 8038 in the box.
No doubt. All right. Next question. From YouTube, do you think that younger clients really don't know about analog because they grew up in a digital era?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't have access to really fancy recording studios, and if you don't have access to really fancy recording studios, and you're not going to know a lot about analog, there's no shame in that. You know, it's just a matter of access. And I got to intern and assist at a lot of really nice recording studios. It's the only reason I know about it. You know, especially coming up when I did. So yeah, but it's not like a thing that's to be ashamed of. You know, and I always encourage clients to like ask any questions. There's nothing I'm doing that is some mystical, magical thing that if someone knows that trick, you know, then it's all over for me. It's just, you know, ask questions, and I'm always happy to explain things. But
yeah, of course.
Yeah, I think there's one thing I think about a lot is just the notion of calibration. It's like a lot of, like, when was the last time you had to calibrate like something? Like there's this sort of like the whole new generation of gear, which is just this like plug and play kind of thing. And it's like, if I had to calibrate my interface, I don't even have a way to do it. Like, it's like not like that, just that notion of like kind of, which is again, like, you know, like you're saying, it's like, it's not bad. Like it's not better or worse, but it's just like, it's just a funny thing of like, it's like, yeah, I haven't had to calibrate anything in a long time.
Yeah.
But that's all changed because, you know, as opposed to like, I'm 38, right? Hello. You know, as opposed to like when we were coming up, or when we were kids recording, or, you know, like joining our first bands and, you know, starting to like go to someone's like house or like a cheap recording studio, like that's what you had to do, unless you had a friend with a 4-track. And it's not like I grew up in the 40s, but, you know, you always had most of the time you had to go somewhere to record where you would have some kind of experience if you chose to pay attention, you know, like with some guy behind a console with like an 8-track machine or like a DAT even. But now it's like, well, you know, again, you have GarageBand on your phone. It's like, I have a friend with an iPad and a duet interface that he bought for, you know, $70. Okay, cool. Let's go record some stuff at his place. So
yeah,
and it's of no fault that, like, you know, they're just tools. It's of no fault that kids don't know about it. You know, at the end of the day, it's like, I just want to get to the place where I feel good about the song
Yeah.
and
Well,
about myself. Sorry,
I love
go ahead.
that it's been democratized, you know? Everybody can record. You can record on your phone. I love that an artist can put I mean, for my purposes, they can record something into their iPhone and send it to me immediately.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Or kids can, you know, yeah, for no money, for something they already have, they can start recording and making their own music, and that's huge because, I mean, even when I was a kid, if you wanted to record, it was expensive, you know? I mean, relatively expensive for a 15-year-old,
Yeah.
you know? It's expensive even to get a little, like, 4-track.
Yeah, and for an industry that, you know, has like been dominated for a long time by like white men, you know, for kids that don't have that access, I'm all for it. Like coming
yeah.
up, I had shame about being younger and not knowing as much about tape and being here for that time. Then I started to see it as like kind of a, like I'm proud of, you know, I'm not, you know, that young anymore, but I'm proud of that. And I'm proud of like younger kids that anyone can get something for pretty cheap and get their music down on something, you know? And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did everybody see that 13-year-old rapper who had his phone, like he like post a picture of him with his phone like hanging from his bunk bed, and he's like rapping at it, and then like a whole bunch of people like donated money to get him gear. And so that's like, I love that. It's when the internet works.
That's great. Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's awesome that anybody can do this now. And, you know, the other thing that it makes me that I think about a lot is training. You know, all of us kind of cut our teeth in pro recording studios. And I worry that that's getting lost.
Hmm.
I mean, but before this all happened, I got like my first interns, and I was stoked because I didn't have to wrap as many cables, but I was also stoked because I was starting to pass on information about how to record and how to, you know, all of these little things that we don't think about anymore, like how to set up a session, how to make people comfortable, how to be a good hang, how to, you know, how it's not really about the microphones or anything. It's about the experience and making music. And I don't know, I loved that I was going to be able to do that. And then Corona hit, and now I don't have any interns anymore. But I know. If anybody wants, I'm taking, I'm kidding. But you know, I mean, thinking about that, do you guys have thoughts about that, about the training environment that exists today?
Absolutely. Well, here's the thing. Human connection is what creates magic. You can't have a plug-in or a piece of analog gear, you know, the unexpected things that happen when you get people together, you know, you can't even quantify it except in the music that's created. You know, so talking about, you know, having interns and creating an environment that's comfortable for artists, you know, yeah, this convenience is great. And sometimes it kind of might be a headache because you can have endless revisions for mixes. But really, yeah, you know, the nuts and bolts of recording, you know, are pretty essential to help make the music making and recording easier.
Yeah.
So, you know, having that groundwork and that knowledge as an engineer, then you get into the fun stuff of, because you know your stuff, you can really just, you know, hang and get into the head of this artist that you're trying to help them create something, and help make them feel comfortable, help it sound greater than they thought it could be, you know, all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
I would encourage anybody who's really in love with the idea of being an engineer and a producer, to try to find a studio to intern at. I try to push that as much as I can, because I think, you know, when I think back to my experiences, you know, interning and assisting at 3 different studios before I landed at Sear, and, you know, especially at Sear, the engineers that I got to assist over, you know, my first 5-6 years there were all heroes of mine. They were all people that I really looked up to. And and then there's all these engineers where you just don't like anything that they do. But
you learn something as well.
You always learn.
I hate to jump in, but you learn something there too. Go ahead.
Absolutely. And there's no, I mean, sitting there next to people that are incredibly competent, you can absorb a lot of information, and then helping the guys that aren't quite as, good at their job. It builds confidence, and you decide, I will never put that mic there ever, and it's a nice, process of elimination. But also just learning how to be respectful in the room, be the fly on the wall. I mean, even as an engineer, there's a lot of moments where you need to keep your mouth shut and just kind of let the producer work with the artist. Maybe there's an argument going on that you need to let, get sorted before the vibe's going to come back together, that kind of thing. There's just, I think, so much to learn from being in a room with a flow of tons of different human beings. There's the other approach of attaching yourself to a producer that you really, really admire what they do sonically. And I think that's also, I mean, they're going to be working with a ton of different clients too. I really think those are the two options to really be great at this. There's a lot of natural talent that people can sit at home, but I just think it takes so much longer to get there. If you're just sitting there, does this work? Does this work? Which is part of it for all of us. But to be surrounded by people that are exactly what you hear, what you can relate to sonically and personally, I think is a huge advantage.
Yeah. Or it's like Kim, like you're talking about, it's like you just start the conversation at a different point. It's like, okay, it's not enough to, like, a lot of people, it's enough to just figure out how to cross the finish line, but it's like, all right, no, I know how to do that. Let's just, let's start there and then go somewhere else with it. And like, I personally, I found that, and just with, the experiences that like you're talking about, Chris, like, the experiences that I've found, James, you and I have had a similar internship experience. It's you learn just how to manage people, and like how to manage like interpersonal relationships, and that's like again, Kim, like what you're saying, it's like you just kind of start, you have that knowledge, and then you this other experience of just dealing with people, and then you start from there. It's not like, that's not the end goal. It's like that's the starting point. So.
Yeah,
I completely agree. There's no replacement for that. You can't learn that on like YouTube videos or mix mag tutorials, and that's nothing will get you like thrown out of a room faster than like having the wrong vibe. Like having the technical skill is the bare minimum. As as far as what I've seen and experienced, it's everything. You have to have that technical skill, which I believe you learn best hands-on in that environment if you want to be a professional producer engineer, and then it's everything else after that that's like will help you stick around.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think I find that, I mean, I'm just gonna kind of restate what you were just saying, Erin, but that makes like total sense in that, you can't learn that anywhere else. And what's more, it's like, just go. If you want to be an intern, just go and sit in a room, be useful, if you're asked to do something, that's cool, but just sit there and observe. Like, even if you don't like the music, even if you think like the session is terrible, even if like man, I don't want to like listen to any of this stuff again, you're gonna learn something. Like, you're gonna learn something from every session, period. Whether it's like a session with an engineer or a producer or an artist who you really admire, or someone who like, maybe shouldn't be singing. Like I make a joke, but like I personally have learned so much from just watching other people and contemporaries and a couple of you work now, where it's like, wow, okay, this is how people, this is how this person approaches handling this situation where, wow, there's a dispute over the bass part, and kind of seems like the songwriter and the bass player are like not getting along. I don't mean to make the bass player the scapegoat, but just seeing how interpersonal, it usually is, yeah. Just seeing how personal relationships are handled, and making, like, I feel like part of what I do and what we do, back when we used to be able to be in a room with more than like 3 people at a time, is making people feel comfortable and not in a bullshit sort of, yeah, man, I love your tunes, I love your vibe, this is so cool, and like not laying it on thick, but making sure that it's a comfortable environment that isn't intimidating, because it can be for the artist. You know, they're coming in, and depending on what's being recorded, it might be a really vulnerable thing, and they have to be in I really believe they have to be in a situation where they can feel vulnerable and not judged, and they have like someone supporting them there. So
that was beautiful. I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, man. For real. That's where it's at.
yeah.
It's absolutely where it's at.
Just to go off, one thing you mentioned there is like, what if you don't like the music? Because that's like, that's the biggest thing that people ask me. It's like, what if you're working on something and you just don't like it? And I'm like, well, you learn how to do that with like this notion of like being the fly on the wall, like the intern. It's like you have to find something that you do like about the thing that you're doing, or it's gonna get, it's gonna go dark. But yeah, it's like you learn how to do that.
Walter Sear always said, we're not music critics. If as an engineer, you're not a music critic, you're just there to capture it and do a good job at that. And I, because I work in jazz so much, we get all the kids that just want to do rock and pop, and they all come in and roll their eyes. And it's like, I've got like the greatest upright bassist on earth in a room here whose sound is incredible. Just ask me what mics I used. You know what I mean? Like, just, there's got to be something you can learn. It may not be your type of music, but just look past the music and pick out something sonically that you dig or don't dig. And let's talk about it and go from there. But yeah, we're not music critics. I mean, if you're a producer, you guys have a little more freedom to critique, but I don't.
Yeah, I've produced things that weren't my favorite music, but it was the artist's music, and helping them achieve the best version of what they're doing that they can, that can be enough. It doesn't mean I want to go listen to the record, but it does mean that it's all just like notes and melodies and harmonies and emotion, right? We're creating an emotional response, and even if it's even as a producer, I think you can produce a song that you don't necessarily think is the best song in the world, and you can make it great, or as great as it can be. So we have so many questions, which is awesome. Let me pick some. That was the analog. So this one is interesting. So now that we all have to mix in an acoustically untreated home, what are your thoughts about room simulating plugins such as Abbey Road Studio 2?
The heck is that?
It's so there are these
plugins
now where you can put on headphones and like tell the plugin what headphones you're wearing, and it will recreate the acoustic environment of a recording studio.
That's really cool if you know that studio, I guess. I don't know.
There you go.
Yeah, I don't use it. I don't buy it. I don't know. I mean, it might be great, but I don't know.
You might as well like use the I don't know, the model of like the parking garage at Whole Foods. Like, if you don't know the studio, it's pointless.
But what I would say to anybody thinking about that is a box of Owen Corning 703 and some impaling clips will cost you about $100.
Yeah.
Put them behind your speakers and then make the back of your room uneven. It doesn't matter how you do it. Bookshelves are really good. I mean, literally anything. I mean, you can see these like slats that are on the wall. That's going to scatter high frequencies. Absorptive at one end, reflective at the other, and scatter high frequencies, and you're going to be in and take away parallel surfaces, and you're in a way better environment than spending $300 on a plugin that's going to emulate a studio that you've never been in.
Yeah. Yeah. Or like, you know, Erin, you're saying earlier that like you have your pair of headphones that you know that you totally trust, like 100%. And like, if you can have a relationship with a piece of gear like that you trust implicitly, like I think that's more valuable than some kind of weird plugin.
Totally.
Yeah, I think any experienced engineer will likely have a pair of headphones that they're like really familiar with, and probably listen in their car. And if they're out of their normal listening environment, can kind of put together an accurate picture of what they're hearing. I mean, that's just what, you know, your training and experience can get you. I mean, sure, it won't be perfect, but you know, it's when you're less experienced, it's difficult working in inaccurate rooms and kind of in unfamiliar places. But, you know, for the most part, like you were saying, Erin, that you kind of were able to just kind of go with it where you are out of town. You know, you don't always have the luxury of making everything perfect. You kind of just got to get started and move forward, figure it out as you go. But experience will make that easier, and the less experience you have, the harder that will be to overcome.
Yeah, you can kind of mix anywhere if you know what it's going to sound like.
Exactly. It's the same goes with people like, what are the best monitors, the best, you know, do I have to buy these, you know, 10, you know, it's like, well, just be really comfortable on what, you know what your monitors sound like. And I mean, there's some pieces of garbage, but, you know, you have something decent, know what your monitors or your headphones sound like. That's a good starting point.
Yeah, we don't like NS10s because they sound good. We like them because we know what they sound like, and because every studio has them.
Right. Yeah. I do have to say, I'm not entirely proud of it, but I do check every mix on phone speaker. Just at the very end, just be like, all right, well, how's it sound on the phone?
Right.
Like,
it's kind of like the modern Oratone at this point.
Yeah, it is.
You know?
Great earbuds. That's what I listen to music on most of the time. I'm not.
Yeah.
You know, just what it
Gotta
is.
be able to hear the bass.
Yeah, because just it's like an example, we had this room that I was kind of partnered in with some other guys, and we had this set of like these like $10,000 speakers, like they were crazy, and they sounded fantastic. But I would like do mixes and then send them out to people, and then people would send back notes, and I'd be like, I can't hear what you're talking about. Like, I don't know what you're saying. And then I think I listened on my laptop speakers, and I was like, oh, they're listening on like phone or laptop speakers or something. They're like checking mixes on this, and I have this fantastic resource, like these $10,000 monitors, but it's like that sort of like disconnected my brain of like, okay, well, I have to be able to make sure that this translates into what people actually listen to, or how people actually listen to the thing. So I just ever since then, I just, you know, phone test every time. So
maybe I'll start listening to all of my mixes on your phone also.
Yeah.
Ted, can I call you with some mixes? Is that cool?
Hello? Can't hear you over the music, Jeffrey.
Good.
So we got, this could be a good one. Are there any processes or tricks that are analog and you miss in digital, or vice versa? I miss feeding a compressor back into itself from a bus. Yeah. Because that is a cool, thick sound that I admittedly stole from John Agnello, who probably stole it from somebody else. Yeah. But boy, that sounds great on vocals and snare drums, and you can't do it digitally because of the inherent delay.
Right.
there's delay in the processing, so it just starts immediately. Everything sounds phasey and starts feeding back, whereas in analog it won't, because there's no processing delay.
Right. Yeah, it's a good one. One thing that drives me crazy in the digital world is every plugin having a mix knob. It's like I wouldn't do that in analog. Like I wouldn't stick my SPX 90 on a channel and then like work the mix. Like I have it over here and then send everything to it. I think it's like you don't just like put all your things on everything. You have like, you know, sends and returns, and then you send multiple things to it, and then that also affects the sound of the effect as well, because it's just, you know, from that kind of
everything's summing into it rather than each read. Yeah, right. You don't have 10 different instantiations of the same reverb.
Right.
And a mix knob, yeah.
For me, it's being allowed to push channels on tape. You know, multi-track. You know, being able to choose, do I want the hi-hat to clip a little bit, you know, on the tape machine or not? You know, having that option while tracking. Pretty much everything else is emulated in some way that I've gotten used to using digitally. I don't think anybody really has a tape plugin that does it the same way, you know.
Yeah.
They try, but
the slate thing is pretty close.
Yeah.
It's acceptable, I would say. It isn't quite there, but it does kind of just make it feel. I mean, I have to say, like, if I get files that are at like 44.1 or 48, and if I do put that slate thing on every track, it feels less digital. So I don't know. I mean, it could be, you know.
This is like a tape emulator?
Yeah, it's a little like tape emulator. Yeah, supposedly they emulated Howie Weinberg's tape machine at like all different kinds of speeds, and it has like you can crank up the input, but then it also turns down the output so it doesn't get crazy.
Right.
It's something. It's the closest thing I found to actually emulate the overall effect of the analog thing.
Right. Yeah, the UAD ATR 102 is pretty good on a bus. It's not, you know what I hate about those things is all the options. Like if I was printing to a 2-track, I'm not going to mess around with the bias, because if I mess around with the bias, it's going to affect the way that the tape holds on to the signal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you bias it at the right over bias, and being able to Mickey around with all of that stuff is like, it's too much. Like it's too much for me anyways.
I found one setting on it that sounds as close to the ATR I grew up on as I could find, and that's, you know, if I use that plugin, that's just where it always lands. So.
Oh, one thing I miss: phase. Like the concept
right on the channel.
Yeah, the concept of checking phase in the digital world is like that's like.
Really?
Yeah, it's like, well, I mean, not a lot of plugins have phase buttons. I mean, I use the turn thing. I think there's more like it's more like as an effect or something, but it's like just the concept of treating phase and adjusting things for like proper phase. It doesn't really translate into the digital world.
Do you mean on like a tracking level, like you're finding that you're getting drum tracks that are like out of phase because people didn't check them when they were recorded?
Yeah, that's probably what I'm talking about. I just always thought for years it would be great if there's just a phase button on the track, which doesn't.
Yeah, I don't know why Pro Tools doesn't just put a phase button on the track.
Yeah, instead of having to put a whole plugin on there just to do that.
Yeah, just to check phase, which is like that's like a recording 101 thing. Check phase.
It's strange too, because not even if you're talking about a bunch of popular like channel strip plugins, like not all of them have and this might be like some of the modeling or whatever, but like not all of them have flippable phase for when you're in like the line mode, let's say, like the UAD SSL channel strip. You can only flip the phase on it if it's in mic mode, which I don't always want it to be in mic mode.
Yeah.
No doubt. No, I'm with that. I'll sign the petition for a phase button Pro Tools channel strip for sure.
Ted, I can send you a phaser if you want.
Oh yeah, no, so I'll just put one of those on every track.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That all said, there are some plugins out there that are pretty cool. I think, Erin, I think you turned me on to Autoline.
Autoline, yeah, I like. Yeah. That's what I'm like. Don't tell everyone about. It's Autoline.
Well, I just did. But you know, there are times where it's not better. You know what I mean? But sometimes I just like, because I've been so anal my whole life about placing mics on drums and stuff. But then sometimes where you put it on there and everything, all the transients lock in a way that's you can't really do without shifting everything around.
Right.
You know, you can't do that in the analog world. And sometimes, probably more often than not, you know, I can get a punchier drum sound or a firmer guitar sound, because I have to put 4 mics on a guitar amp because it's just a habit. But it you know, it helps in a lot of cases. It's not always better, but it's a different approach to dealing with phase that I've actually really
Interesting.
fallen in love with.
I bet that's great on really dense, like rock stuff.
Yeah.
To really get the drums to push through without having to make them 6 dB louder than everything else.
Exactly.
Also bass too. I kind of forgot about that plugin, but I just used that on a record where the bass player had 2 amps, and it was great actually. It's like total Jesus Lizard, like
cool.
Grindy, really distorted, but like high endy, not fuzz bass, really, and like aligning that with the DI. I was like, you know, shifting stuff back and forth, and I ended up trying Auto Align. I was like, wow, it's really good. Kind of felt like cheating, but it's really good.
Well, you know.
Yeah.
Cheating, but
I'll cheat. It's fine.
No, I've spent way too much time trying to do that, Jeff. The like, getting the bass to feel right, and it's never right. Like I never feel like it's right, but okay, Auto Align. Here we go.
Yeah, isn't that old like the old, you hear the stories of like Mutt Lange with the delay on every channel, and he's like moving stuff around to like get it all in phase, and it's like, oh god, it's like so much work. It's just a plugin, you know.
Yeah, that is pretty amazing.
That's when budgets were a lot.
Yeah.
So let's see. We got more. Please share some insights about gain staging in the digital world compared to analog. I think people just forget about if you haven't been in the analog world, you don't know about gain staging, and if you're sending something to a plugin and it's clipping the plugin, just because you pull down the output of that plugin doesn't mean the plugin isn't clipping, and it's going to start sounding small and thin and crappy. Is the insight. So make sure you're not clipping one of the 10 plugins you have on the channel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as maybe a more recent convert to like mixing in the box, I think I was joking at the beginning of this where it was like, you know, after 10 minutes I was like, oh cool, all my headroom's gone and like everything's clipping, and you know, I'm gonna go quit and work for UPS. That like headroom and gain staging, you know, it depends obviously like what kind of console you would be used to working on, but I find that that's way more important in the digital world, where it's not like, wow, like my drum sub fader has to be like slamming because I know it's going to 2 channels on the console, and it's like, it's, you know, letting the console do some of the work as well. It's like, I found that I had to maybe back stuff off from where I was used to gain staging it in the analog world, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
I think one of the advantages of having faders, console faders, is I will put up the drum tracks and I'll watch the meters as I'm doing that, where with Pro Tools, they just default at Unity.
Yeah.
And my drum, when I'm mixing, and I'll have a parallel, compressor and EQ and whatever. It's the faders are usually around -6, -5, that kind of thing on the console. But you open up a session, you just immediately start getting to work on it. It's already at Unity, so not having the faders to actually push and the meters to watch, I think makes it a little, you're definitely more likely to just start overloading everything right away. But it's just something to pay attention to.
Yeah, I pull everything down completely no matter what the mix is, and just start from there. And I'm just very conservative, bringing everything up and just watching, because yeah, if you just start at zero and even try to pull things down to make it happen, it's just not going to happen. You're going to run out of headroom so fast. And a lot of the plugins, boost everything like you just said. So you just got to be super conservative from the get-go.
Yeah. And there's a lot of there's a lot of ways to get into trouble where you can, in the analog world, if you're clipping something, it might sound okay. I mean, if you like clipping an LA2A sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Clipping a digital LA2A does not sound awesome, but it doesn't mean you're not doing it. And it's easy to do, and then just turn down the output so that you don't see red on a meter, but it's still, you're still affecting your sound. Also, mixes don't have, like, in the digital world, we're still in the middle of, volume wars, right? Everybody, I mean, I hear rough mixes that are like 3 times louder than any mix I would ever deliver to a mastering engineer. And I mean, Kim, I'm sure you can attest to this. Your mix doesn't need to be loud. The mastering engineer is going to make it loud. Your clients can turn it up, or you can turn it up. And I think that's some of the problem too, is that gain staging in the box, everybody's looking to make something that's at like, -1 on a digital peak meter, and it's impossible.
Total. I'll get mixes, like rough mixes from clients that are so loud, and I'll send them back like my first pass, and they'll be like, yeah, like this, but it's, just doesn't have like the power. I'm like, because it's crazy, it's hard. That's a tough thing that I deal with. It's like, it can't be that loud. Let the mastering engineer do that.
Yeah. I had somebody recently say that what they would do when that happened is they would send their mix, and then they would send back the rough mix, but with the gain reduced so that it equalizes the volume, and they go, there, now listen to these two.
Great.
And they go,
Yeah, I've had to
oh,
do that a few times.
oh, I get it.
Never thought of it.
Kim, is that a constant struggle in your world of just dealing with overall level? And like, is it like, do you have a thing that you put out there to clients that like addresses that?
No, so I don't really have a standard that I require for mixes being sent in. And I also am pretty lucky in that a lot of the genres and engineers and producers that I work with aren't sending me, really, really loud mixes. It's easier to give something to compare that they can listen to rather than explain it. Especially when it comes to mastering, people want to know what it is, what it does. And typically I'm just like, let me master a song and you can hear it. I mean, that's generally the best way for people to kind of understand what you're talking about. Really, my biggest issue is that I don't always get the faux mastered mixes that an engineer has sent out for approval. 75% of the time I do, but some of the time they don't send me what the client's been listening to. And that's really important that I have that. I mean, even just putting an L2 on your mix, and getting a couple more dB and sending it to your client can help them kind of understand what it's going to sound like when it's louder. Now, everybody has to do that, but if you did do that, you definitely need to send that to me so that I can hear how loud it is, what they've been listening to. And on occasion, I will say to the band and the engineer, like, hey, like, how do you guys feel if I come in a little bit under where this, you know, this kind of reference master is? Because I'd like to send that to you. And most of the time, people are pretty open to it, you know, but it's hard once you've been listening to something at a certain level. You know, it's hard to listen and compare to something that's not as loud, and to get them to go with it.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. So do you feel like an L2 or like any digital limiter, but an L2 because you mentioned it, even if it's not actually reducing gain, if it's just being used as an element to raise the volume, it's changing the sound?
In whatever way it's changing the sound, the benefit of the artist or client hearing their mix louder, and what happens. I mean, it's also beneficial for, you know, the mixer too. You know, you want to know what your mix is going to sound like when it gets louder, you know, and skilled mixers know what's going to happen to their mix, but people who are still kind of learning, you know, you need to know what's going to happen to your snare and your vocal when your song goes for mastering. So it's really important to reference that and to also maybe present that to, you know, the artist, the client. If you're mixing at a very low level, I mean, I'd imagine that you'd send them your mix and they'd be like, this isn't loud at all. I don't know what I'm listening to. I'm trying to compare it to stuff and it's really quiet. You know, so sending them something that's a little bit louder and easier for them to compare with, you know, can be beneficial. But L2, L3, it doesn't, you know, anything that can add a couple dB, you know, if you're already kind of close there, you know, is helpful. It's helpful for, you know, the clients, and it's helpful for the mixer.
Sure.
But certainly not necessary. You know, like I said, seasoned people, you know, that already kind of know where it's going to end up may not need to go through these steps, but certainly, you know, where we're getting a little bit more experience, it's definitely helpful.
Right on. All right, guys. So we're at like an hour and a half, and I think maybe we wrap it up. Yeah.
That's it.
That's it. But thank you guys so much for doing this with me and hanging. It was awesome to get to talk to all of you. Maybe we go around and just let the world know where you can be found on social media or website or anything like that. Chris.
My website is therealchrisallen.com, and Christopher Allen on Facebook. There's about 33,000 Chris Allens, so look for the one in New York. And yeah, that's about it.
Ted?
My website is tedyoungmusic.com, and my email is tedyoungmusic@gmail.com, and my Instagram is @tedyoungmusic. It's pretty straightforward, really. You break it down like that.
Right on. Erin?
My Instagram is @Erin Tonkon, Tonkon. My website is under construction, as it has been for the past 3 years, but you can find me on littleundergroundmanagement.com/Erin-Tonkon. Erin Tonkon on everything. I think there's only one of me, so it should be easy to find if you spell it right.
Jeff?
Yeah, funnily enough, my website is also tedyoungmusic.com. No, you can find me. It's jeffbernerrecording.com. That's BERNER. I think most social media, it's @Jeffrey, JFFREY, Berner. And my email, you can do info@jeffbernerrecording.com, or just call Ted. Either way.
Yeah.
Kim.
Yeah, you can find me at knackmastering.com. And I also have a Facebook page by the same name, Knack Mastering. And you can check out that hardware piece I was talking about at whitestoneaudioinstruments.com.
Awesome. And you can find me at heyfrazee.com or at heyfrazee on all things social media. And thank you for watching, and thank you guys for hanging with me. All right. Bye, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank
you.
you.